All right, guys, I'm here with a very special episode today, and I do want to start always by giving a thank you and shout out. I was introduced to B in a group message about, I think, 2 or 3 months ago, and I didn't really know what he did. Obviously, when I get introduced to others in the marketing space, it's usually a good chance to just throw ideas back and forth. But when I got to talk to him, I realized he was a lot more than an idea guy. He actually had a huge network of not only potential clients, but others in the marketing space. So, B, in the short time I've known you, you've provided tons of value to me, and I just wanted to say thank you before we get started. So, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on the show, and I'm glad I could help.
Yeah. So, for people who don't know what you do, what is like, if you could describe it in a very short way, what does your company do for businesses?
Yeah, so I'm a marketing broker slash matchmaker. It's probably the best term that I've heard. So I basically connect businesses with the right marketing partners. And over the last 5.5 years, I've talked to 901 different marketing agencies and partners. And I work with about 11% of those businesses, at least on the agency side. And then I help businesses that are looking to scale, right, find the right partners, find the right marketing agencies.
Okay. So, did you start doing this, or was this a pivot after maybe trying a marketing agency or a company like that yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I originally, funny enough, started out as an engineer. And so I used to work with like B2B businesses, anywhere from about 50 to 1,000 type employer range, understanding like from a C-level perspective, IT perspective, like how a business needs to run, and then build out technology roadmaps of how they get from A to B to C. And so I just built this skill set of like business consulting, sales, leadership, and technology experience. And when I got into the marketing world, I was building out websites, Google Ads, SEO, but I really just didn't enjoy doing 80-hour websites on the weekend. Like I didn't need to make a couple extra $1,000 on the weekend. And so I started working with different marketing agencies and partners and realizing there was a big gap. Like marketing agencies didn't really understand business and business people didn't really understand marketing. And so from that, this kind of idea was born where I was like, oh, maybe I could be that matchmaker in the middle to really understand what a business needs, what stage they're at, and what partners actually fit to get them to that next level before we have to swap out partners again. And so that's how the idea came about. And then I spent the next 5.5 years just building it out.
Yeah, and I feel like there's got to be a huge trust element too when you're not the one actually offering the service, that you really are just there to caretake, because obviously on the back end, it's incentivizing for you to make it a good long-term relationship.
100%. My model is fully built around like making sure my customers are happy, because if my customers are happy, then my agencies are happy. And if my agencies are happy, then I'm happy. And so it's kind of like the model's built to be customer centric and make sure that the customers win.
Yeah. So was there like a clear day where you said, this is my last website or this is my last blog I'm ever writing? Or was it kind of a slow phase out from doing some things yourself to really just being a connector of the right people?
It was a pretty quick phase out because I had an agency that was like, hey, B, if you send us websites, we'll give you a percentage back. And I was like, hold on a second. So I can like look over the websites, make sure things are being done well, and you're going to do all the work. Like, okay, that model makes sense to me. But where that like kind of flawed was once that website was built, that same agency was like, oh, I could do Google Ads and I could do SEO too. And when I was looking over like how they were doing Google Ads and the details that they would put into SEO, it was nowhere near enough for what the customer needed. And so for me, that was like a big thing. I was like, I would need to find agencies that do those specific services well. So in my mind, I thought maybe I could find like, 3 or 4 agencies and solve those problems. But then as I did that, I noticed another agency, they were specifically good at like production videos and stuff like that. They weren't good at the other stuff they said. And then another like, and then just keep going on. You're like, oh, agencies are only really good at 1 to 3 things max. And so if I'm able to puzzle piece that together for customers, because it's literally impossible if you're trying to find like, let's say your business is scaling from like 7 to 8 figures and trying to go past that, you typically need multiple partners. And it's very, very hard to like bring in 3 or 4 marketing agencies in one go and get that right on the first try.
Why do you think so many marketing agencies feel that desire to be, let's call it, the jack of all trades? Like, do you see it a lot where they're good at one thing and then who knows why they try to add 10?
Yeah. So in the marketing agency space, typically you'll start out with like a niche. And as you start doing that niche, customers are going to ask you for different things. And when you don't have a proper funnel built out and you don't have proper systems kind of like in place to bring in the customers for that specific niche, or you want to like just increase revenue because you're like, okay, well, we do SEO, but if we just added another service, we could double our business. And so that's how they start getting into other areas. And every single time a customer goes, well, okay, if you do that, do you do this? And then enough people ask, and then they'll tack that on. But then all of a sudden you end up becoming this kind of like generalized agency that doesn't have all the pieces and the departments working together. They're all just kind of piecemealed. And so where it really does work well is in like the higher up agency level. Like this is like you're getting kind of into the enterprise space where you have to hire people at a certain level that can glue together the business to make sure things run well, right? And that's just kind of like the way the organizations work as agencies grow, literally how other businesses grow as well.
Yeah, it's like you need a human Zapier to talk to everyone.
That's exactly it. Like,
Yeah, I guess, do you think that, like, from your perspective, you're referring tons of businesses out. It's, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but is it much easier to refer a business that's really good at one thing or that's kind of good at a lot of things?
yeah, it's a lot easier to do a referral to businesses that do specifically one thing, or they work with a specific type of customer because you know that they typically will understand that industry. Not all agencies are like that, right? There's a lot of niche agencies that are actually niching down because they couldn't figure out the marketing aspect. And so they probably have like 2 or 3 clients and they're like, okay, we're just going to go down this path. But if you can find those agencies that are like niche in a specific type of service, they could service all types of customers, but like specific type of service are really good. The harder ones that I'm always trying to find is like people that know how to do like strategy and execution. Those agencies are really, really hard to find, but it's what customers typically need. And they're like a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, because so I was talking to someone about this the other day. Do you think it's because typically those two skill sets you just listed are not often in the same person?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Or typically you'll see it in like the founder, but then it's like you have to pass that off to two different people, right? So you have an execution arm of the agency, but you also need a strategic arm. And most people, like, let's say you had an agency, the model that I would build out is I would actually bring in like a fractional CMO or have multiple consultants on the strategy side that I can call on depending on what kind of customer that I'm working with. And then that person would work with the execution team to fulfill on things. And they become the bridge between the customer, the marketing, and then the execution team.
Yeah. Do you see with just the raw amount of, I guess, new AI, new tech that comes out every day, do you think that we're in a shortage of ideas or a shortage of people that can execute right now?
And I think it's a little bit on both. I think we have a lot of execution people, but it really comes down to like strategy and thinking outside the box. Because if you're trying to build an agency that can scale, you really need to build something that can be repeatable, right? And so if you're building something that's repeatable, you're not going to have that creativity aspect of it. Because every time you add the creativity aspect to it, you're adding complexity to the system,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of times, like customers are looking at agencies to be that creative force. But a lot of the times, the creative force actually should come from inside the company and then have a team execute on it. That is much easier to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I like how you phrase that. I've never known how to put it. That there is kind of this need of, like, we always joke internally in our company that if you want to make anything good, human, AI, human, AI, human. So it always kind of has a, 3-to-2 ratio of human. But I think it's the same for being able to help a business owner with their strategy. Like, you can come up with a million ideas, but if that core desire or idea doesn't come from them, it's not always going to be something they can even really feel like is their own business. And I've noticed that too at scale with not just one industry, but a few.
Yeah, 100%. That makes sense.
So, what has been like a big challenge for you in terms of vetting people, both on the client side and the agency side? Because I think one thing that I will say I respect about you was like the call didn't feel how a normal call went when we first met. But like when I was done with it, I was actually calm because I was like, wow, that guy collected a lot of data in like a short period of time. Like seriously, it's one of those things like sometimes I end a call and I'm like, oh, if I have to do a second one, it's going to be the same one all over again. But for you, it was like a lot of questions, very quick. But then afterwards, I was like, I feel like he actually got what he needed. Like, have you just been good at that because of your engineering experience, or is that something you've sharpened over the years?
Yeah. So on the agency side, I've actually gotten tougher and tougher. So usually I'll have that like 30-minute call. People don't realize how much, as you kind of said, how much information I'm like collecting in that first call. Cause I've done this enough times, 900 plus times to be like, I know kind of what to ask and what to listen for. And if I get what I want, I go, okay, cool. Like this is on the right track. I have even deeper, like typically with agencies that are like deeper or more strategy or more complex than like a niche, man, I have a secondary thing where I look at all of their work, which we went through kind of your stuff, but then I have another phase of 30 to 35 questions that I go through. And even with all the stuff that I do, there are still things that slip through the crack, right? Like my service isn't perfect, but in my head, I'm like, how many barriers of entry can I put into my network so that when I'm referring people out, I've done as much due diligence as I possibly can so that when the customer is speaking to them, they have an agency that's like vastly above average than what they're normally talking to. So that's kind of how I built my system. And I'm always trying to iterate. My engineering brain's like, how do I make this better? Like, how do I go from like a 75% success rate? And let me just like put that into context. If a business is trying to find a marketing agency by themselves, they have a sub 10% chance of finding a marketing agency. And I think it's actually much lower than that. So when I say 75% on the first try, that's quite high. But I'm always like, how do I get that to 85, 90%? Because there's always going to be things that I can't control, unfortunately. Like on the business side, I don't control people's personalities, how they communicate, if their business like has enough product to sell, if the marketing works, and all that different type of stuff, right? And then on the agency side, same thing. I'm always trying to pay attention to agencies that are like, we're in a hyper growth phase or we're really early on. All these things that kind of put into my head that, hey, there's a chance of this agency breaking in the next like 3 months to a year. And I don't want to put my customers in that position. And so the amount of vetting that I do is really like just engineering process oriented. And I'm constantly iterating every single time that I'm like, oh, I could have probably asked a better question here. Or one of the questions that I ask at the end of one of my vetting things is like, is there anything I've missed asking you? Most agencies like, yo, you've been so thorough. But then every now and then someone will throw a question at me and I'm like, okay, that's another thing that I didn't know about agencies that I can start asking in the future. And that process gets refined over the years, right?
Yeah, what's your best, let's call it like gold extracting question to vet an agency owner that maybe doesn't sound too intense, but I'd like to know your psychology why you ask it.
So one of the ones I really like is that first I ask like how many team members, and then from there I ask, okay, based on the team members you have, are they full-time or are they part-time? And then from there I go deep to go, are they outsourced or is everyone based in a certain location? So right off the bat, you understand how their team is organized. And then the sub follow-up to that is, okay, well, how like in your team, out of the let's say 45 people you said you have, tell me the breakdown of team members and who's on what team. And so from that, you can understand, okay, this is how they look globally as a team and where they are and across what time zones. And then you look at the pyramid down and go, okay, if this one person leaves, that entire team is in trouble, right? And you can start spotting certain like red flags or danger zones if you work with a certain type of agency. And then some of the other stuff is like you'll hear, oh, we have like this many people on, like, let's say you have a team of 50. We have 28 developers, right? And then you have low like customer success teams. And so you're like, they're very heavy dev focused, but
Yeah.
they're not very heavy on the account management side and the communication side of things. So all of these things are just kind of like things that you're paying attention to just understand how an agency is structured so that you know what's the most important thing to them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess on the inverse, what's the probably the worst red flag you've ever heard on a call where maybe you had to keep a straight face and act like it was a normal thing to say, but you're like, all right, I could not refer this company out.
Yeah, I hear a lot of times where people are like, yeah, we grew 100 to 200% last year. We plan on growing another 100 to 200% this year. That's typically a big red flag for me because agencies growing at that speed typically are breaking and hiring very fast. Unless you've like ran an agency before that has scaled like that before, you have the systems and processes and the SOPs to build, that's just going to be a nightmare for a
Yeah, that's
client.
like going to the skate park and just immediately going to the tall ramp. Like, yeah, you gotta hope they've done that before.
Yeah, exactly.
So on the customer side, because I think this is also very fascinating. I think I know that you're like the conference king, just going around every conference in the country or maybe out of country.
Yeah.
How have you found your own ability to market yourself to the business owners themselves? Because I think you have such a good product that an agency that meets you, it's like a very sticky, like I want to be around this guy, relationship. But I guess with the business owners, how have you kind of inserted yourself as that trust liaison for them?
I use every single marketing channel possible. So I go to conferences to build relationships. Like being there in person and meeting people in person is like number one. Because I want to know people like to actually feel that I'm actually genuinely trying to help, right? Like that's like the biggest thing for me. When my service doesn't work, that actually drives me nuts. I'm like, how do I make it better? How do I do better? And I want that relationship to be there, like B actually have the best interest at heart. It's just he wouldn't have known that this thing would have happened, right? That's just part of the matchmaking style. Based on like the other types of things that I do a ton of social content, right? So I'm across like LinkedIn, Insta, and like ramping up on that and learning how to iterate and test a lot more now on those platforms. I'm in different communities where I'm just value dropping, adding information in there. And then I just have like an email list where people jump in and I'm just sharing like, hey, I found this really cool agency recently, or here's something that I found that, a business needs to shift their perspective around to win in the marketing space. And so I'm always just trying to like take the stuff that I'm learning and constantly share back. And these podcasts, for example, this is my fourth podcast this week.
Hey, I'm only at number two, so
Yeah.
yeah. I think care is definitely here, and I think I see that in your content too. Like you seem very like focused on your own process, which therefore shows focus on clients. What's the number one thing in this whole time period that you've had to maybe change about yourself, or maybe you're even still figuring out? Because I think like product makes sense here, relationship making makes sense, but obviously you have a different set of intricacies in your model than probably most others do, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the biggest thing I've learned about being in this space and the hardest thing is like you don't have full control of the outcome. As an engineer, that's very hard to
Yeah.
accept because when we're in engineering, right, like we typically will build things so that we know the outcome, right? Like, and then you feed it back to the feedback loop and you'll consistently do it. The process here is actually there's variables in this process that you don't have full control over. And so one of the things that I've learned the most and I've had to accept is that businesses are growing themselves and they break and they're not perfect and they have founders that are trying to figure things out as they're going along too. They might not be the best communicators. They might not make time to onboard people properly. Like there's all of this stuff on the business side. And then there's all this stuff on the agency side because they're also a business and they're growing and they're testing and they're trying new things and things shift in their business. And so you're taking these two almost like very entropy heavy, like catastrophe type units, and you're trying to match them at the right time so that they can grow together. That kind of makes sense. And
Yeah.
that is a very, very hard thing to do. And starting out this business, I never knew how hard that would be. But it's kind of cool that like now I've gotten to a point where I'm like, there's certain scenarios where I'm like, there is no way these two companies would have ever found each other and helped each other grow unless I was in the middle, knowing the relationship on both sides and piecing them together at that point. And so it's just like when those like really solid relationships happen, those kind of like drive me forward to be like, how do I do this like every single time?
Yeah. I guess, yeah, I didn't ask you that. What are some green flags for you, both on the client side and the agency side, where you're having that conversation and it's like, yes, they said this, they said this.
Yeah. So on the business side, it's someone who has like that marketing brain and like sees the holistic picture where they know that there's going to be some testing, there's going to be some failures, but they know that they just will continue to iterate and just communicate really well with the agencies. So like these are people that have worked with other agencies before and they just know kind of like what to expect out of that relationship, that it's not going to be 100% perfect. But if it's like 80 to 85% of the way there, like you have a solid relationship. People that also have like a marketing budget in mind. Like it's an investment mindset versus like a I need ROI in the next month. Like that's not how marketing works. And I wish it was, but it's not. You
Yeah.
have to be testing, right? Like it's constant testing. And at one point, you hit enough things and you make enough iterations and changes, that's where you see the flywheel really take effect. And a lot of the times you're like growing this grassroots thing, but you don't see what's the outcome is actually going to be. So that's on the business side. On the agency side, typically what I'm looking for is people that have been around for a while. So minimum 5 years. When I hear like I've been in this agency business for 10 to 15 years, that's like cool. Like you've been there for a while, you're like dialed into it and you've had enough time to build out systems and processes and figure out what customers do work and which ones don't work and see the red flag for yourself. So those agencies typically won't pick up clients that they know are going to be not a fit for them, right? And then when I go talk to agencies about systems and processes, when I see like like spark in their eyes, we're like, yo, let me show you the systems and processes we built. That's another like really solid green flag where you're like, cool, because they know that without those systems and processes, they won't continue to be able to give a certain outcome. Otherwise, you're just kind of throwing things at a wall and hoping the team figures it out.
Have you read the book Rocket Fuel?
I haven't. No.
There's a whole concept of visionary versus integrator. And any of our, close clients know that I probably play the visionary role way more. And, I think when we talked, I was like, yeah, let me show you my Airtable system. I was lucky enough to have a girlfriend who was very organized and systems brain to build that for me, just based off of this guy complaining. But do you see that that's like probably one of the harder hires? Like maybe people can find great editors, they can find an ads guy, but they struggle to find their systems person within the agency?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on what kind of founder you are. So some people are like that integrator in that visionary, like in that CEO role. But yeah, finding that second person in command that you can trust because it takes off all the stuff that a visionary doesn't want to do. And it's like that detailed stuff. And so as a visionary, you have to also like look over that and be like, are they building the right thing? Like, is it actually working in the system? And once you actually have that trust built, you can be like, all right, continue doing everything because you know where we're trying to head and you're building the right things underneath it. It is a hard role to find. I think it's easier to find, like you said, the specialists of like Google Ads or Facebook Ads or those types of things, because the CEO has to actually understand the visionary's goal and then make sure that the systems and processes and what they build underneath actually aligns to that.
Yeah, and I'm going to take a second. I want to talk to the marketing agency owners that are going to watch this. So for everyone who doesn't know, I run a short form video company. We do YouTube now as well. But I used to literally have every client text me raw video files, remember which ones to edit, and hopefully post correctly. And I actually thought that was scalable. Like if you were to interview me at that time, I would have told you it works because I can just have a lot of coffee. And when Katie came in, I think she like almost had a panic attack and wondered like, how does this guy operate? So if you're in a phase where like what I said the first time sounds like where you are, like your only hire is a systems person. Like please just hear that loud and clear. And I'm sure B can attest, like we all have those delusions until you hire the right person.
100%.
Yeah. All right. Now I want to try to do another thing here. This is a funny idea I had this morning. So I recently hired a paid ads guy. We're testing on my accounts and doing all of this. And I want you to rate me as a client. I'm going to tell you how I've been to him. And I want
Okay.
like A, B, C, D, or F. So
Okay.
he was a referral to me. So I quickly texted him and he called me within 30 minutes. So I'll give him credit. We had about an hour-long conversation. I vetted him. I asked my questions. I made sure I understood what his ad strategy was down to like the actual buttons he was clicking, just because I had experience in it. Then we started working together. 2 weeks went by where I think I didn't fill out my onboarding form. So I'm just going to share that. Then we eventually did our call. I took about, I believe, 3 weeks to get him all creatives for the paid ads. I missed a call to confirm the setup of the ads. I did a second call. I understood the setup. And then when it was time for the final look through, I took a blind trust moment and said, hey, I saw how we started. I gave you my files. I don't want to control this. I'm going to let you launch it. And it's been, I think, 3 weeks now. We're at $220 ad spend with 3 booked calls and 1 lead form filled out outside of that. And in our first iteration of it, I didn't ask him to turn the ads off. I didn't ask him to change them. I asked him what creatives I could give him to make the ads better or to test more things. So hearing all of that, what were some of the good? What was some of the bad? And then at the end, maybe give me an overall rating as a, how am I doing as a client?
And I'm just gonna want to clarify. You spent $220 on the whole ad campaign and you got 3 calls out of it?
As of like yesterday or the day before, we're probably close to like 270 right now.
Got it. Okay, cool. So number one, you started off kind of slow, not giving the guy what he needs to move fast. But if it's not a priority for you, that's fine. It's just like letting that person know. The biggest thing for me, like, and this is just kind of how I run my business, is like if I book or I tell someone I'm going to be on like a call and stuff, like I'm not going to push it out, like if it's a priority. Or if I know that I'm like super inundated with stuff, I'll be like, hey, look, like I'm gonna need some time. And so like that communication aspect is going to be really big. I think in terms of like not checking his work and stuff, I mean, I think it makes sense. I think you have to always assume a little bit of risk and trust when you're going to work with a partner. And so that part is fine as well. Now it's time to like, hey, are you checking in? Do you have like a meeting with him every single month to be like, hey, how are things going? Or are you getting feedback? Like I know you're 3 weeks in now, I heard like. So do you have something planned to like
Yeah.
review how things are going?
Yep. So every 2 weeks, we're basically just looking over them. And like, I think this is one that'd be interesting to talk about. So we did our, I think it was Monday. We fully reviewed what money has been spent. We went through the CPMs, male, female, who's viewing it, what are the age demographics. And I felt that it was like, I wanted to be as informative as I could as a client without changing the entire plan. So I think I wanted to just build whole new ad sets, start everything from scratch. But as you're probably aware, this is a fresh ad account. And the fact that we even have 3 booked calls was a huge deal.
Yeah.
And what I quickly learned was, in my videos, I think I gave off a very, let's call it masculine, more Grant Cardone energy.
Mhm.
So the men were way easier to reach, but they wouldn't convert. And then what
Mhm.
was super fascinating was the females cost 3 times more to get the attention of, but they were the ones booking. What I came in and said is, okay, I think maybe I need to create an ad set strictly for the female audience because I believe their pain points and what they need help with is different than the men so that we can then segment those out. But the harder part was not fully changing the existing ad. I think that's where, as a business owner, I had that control thing kick in.
What I think is good is that you're actually talking back and forth. Like, is there one of the questions I would ask you, is there anything that you've kept from the Google Ads person that you want to talk to him about, but you just like just something you're not happy with, for example? Is there anything that you're holding back on him, not telling him?
Yeah, I think it's my desire for how much creative I want to put out because I don't know if it's actually helpful or if it's just one of those, I know I can do it, so I think I should. Like, for
Yeah.
example, when he came to work with us, I think he had a very positive experience of like, he doesn't have to come up with any creative. He's not doing any editing. Like we just handed all that off to him. But it's also like, when does it become poison versus a good dose is, I went through my funnel and I'm looking at it, and all I'm thinking is like, I would change this on the copy. I would change that. But I'm not doing that with like a true data or I know this works perspective. It's I want to touch my work thing. And I think that's the one that I'm struggling with the most is like, when do I actually come in helpfully to make the change versus am I just trying to control this?
Yeah, I mean, like if there's certain ways that you want to say stuff, like I mean, that's just part of testing. Like I'm actually okay with that and just having a conversation with the Google Ads person to be like, hey, what do you think about testing this and testing that? And if you truly trust their opinion, like if you hired someone as an expert and you come up with an idea and they go, yeah, that makes sense or it doesn't make sense, like taking into account what they say. But ultimately, like you know what messaging you want to bring across, so why not test it? Like you can 100% test it. The other thing I would say is the amount of creative testing that you want to do, this would be what the Google Ads person would have to answer is, are you putting enough budget behind that to actually get accurate numbers to know if this ad is better than the other ad? You know what I'm saying? And how long would that take? At a $300 spend, let's just, I don't know how much you're spending a month right now. How much are you
Right.
spending a
Yeah,
month?
right now. So month one, I believe we're gonna do 1,000. October, I told him I'd bump to 15, and then I'm gonna keep it there for 3 months until we know that that's a dialed number.
Got it. Okay. So for example, at that like spending ratio, you're likely not going to get a ton of data to be able to test a ton of different creative because you
Yeah.
need enough data to go into the creatives that you currently have. And see, okay, well, this one's the winner. These three aren't. Okay, let's sub that out and then add another two in to try something different. You know what I mean?
So what we did out up front is we turned the female ad off entirely. I'm refilming that one. And then, which was crazy. So by turning that off, we had call number three book, which was a male a day later. But yeah, do you think others like especially like the business owners that you talk to, do you think that this is an act a lot of business owners do? Like, how am I doing as a client or no?
No, like I think you as a client is a I think you'd be an ideal client because you're part of the process and you're part of seeing what's happening. Like you're kind of aware of like, hey, am I taking too much control? And like that awareness is really, really good because you want to be a part of the results, but you don't want to take over everything. So I like what you're doing. So I would rate you or like a B. You probably just
Like,
need to actually attend your meetings on time and build out like systems and KPIs that you're trying to track. Most customers don't do that, but the best customers do that type of work because they won't just leave it hands off, or they have like a CMO or they have a marketing director that's doing this type of work with the people that they've hired.
that makes sense. So I guess for you, what do you think your phase of figuring it out is in your own business right now? Like, obviously, I've seen some of your posts. I want to congratulate you. I know you had your best month ever. I think it was 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, what at your level are the things you're still struggling with, and what are you trying to figure out within your business?
Yeah, for me, I'm trying to figure out a bunch of different like kind of like lead channels, like building out consistency in the business is the biggest thing for me. So that's like playing around with different funnels until something actually hits. And so right now I have like a bunch of different things going on. Like I probably do more marketing than most 7 or 8 figure businesses do in terms of channels. My goal right now is to just keep iterating on like the two specific ones that I'm like focusing on while like keeping all the other ones kind of alive and seeing if I can iterate enough till I hit that next like tipping point. That's really my focus is to like fix the funnel on the front end to just bring in more leads because I can help connect people. Most people don't know Marketing Broker exists. And then the other thing that I'm building is I have a marketing agency community that I'm building, and I'm going through a bit of a transition right now to kind of like the model I'm changing just a little bit, but I need to get everyone within the agency community to agree on that new model before I let everyone else kind of like start joining and being a part of that. So those are kind of the things that I'm figuring out next. And then some M&A stuff because I get a lot of people asking me, hey, do you know any agencies that want to sell? Because of the network that I've built, I think that's going to start becoming a service that I add on over time.
Yeah. And do you ever experience that it's almost like, I don't know how to describe it, but like the counselor that just needs a hug? Like you're the guy who's always out here vetting people so much that it's almost hard for you to find these roles because you're who you are?
Ask that question in a different way. I didn't fully understand.
So like you're obviously doing so much for other businesses to help them find the right marketing partners, to agencies. You're basically a form of lead gen that most like I didn't know really existed. I mean, I probably would have said I believe marketing brokers exist, but not in this sense. Like, do you find it hard to receive this value you give others for yourself because there's not a B for you?
It's kind of funny because recently I was looking for replacing my accountant. And as I was going through that process, I was like, man, I wish there was like an accounting broker. Someone that's like, hey, man, based on your business size, based on what you're doing, this is the accounting firms you should probably talk to. Because I got inundated with like 20 different recommendations on here, you should use this person or this person. Everyone had different prices. So yeah, I wish there was someone like me there. So that and the way that I actually approached that, finding that accounting business was like, I'm going to just talk to all these people because that's how I do my marketing stuff. When you talk to like 20 different people across a very specific type of service, you start going, oh, this is the high end pricing, this is the mid pricing, this is the low pricing. Here's what you get here, here's what you get here. And then you can lay out the land a little bit better. So yeah, I wish there was someone do what I do for other businesses and just see the value in it, right? Like someone having a network that they've built over the last 5.5 years in a very specific area. How long would it take anyone else to do that? Like you would literally need to stop doing your business and start focusing on like meeting people and marketing for the next
Yeah.
like 5.5 years to catch up.
I guess, and then who do you think are some of your like who's that need to be around you? Because like I think you have like in my head like five different jobs you're playing, right? You have like marketing relationships, you have individual agency relationships on the scouting side, the client relationships, the networking role to go find the new client relationships, but then also like I'm assuming on your back end, you're also leading your internal team of like, here's all of our systems to make sure this works. Like, which of those do you plan to hire next? And do you think you will struggle to hire with the most?
Yeah. So once I figure out the lead gen on the front end, like once that's kind of coming in, the next piece of hiring is like a marketing, almost like marketing recruiter. Like someone's just like constantly building out the database and doing that first level of filtering for me. So I'm not doing it. That'd be number one. And then once that's figured out and those systems are built around that person and I know how to swap that person in and out with like SOPs and processes and systems, the next piece would be to hire someone that cares as much as I do when it comes to like the understanding of business and knowing what they need and then matching with the right partners. So those are like the two key people. Within my company right now, I have about 9 people working for me across different things in my own marketing. From like, I have a fractional CMO, I have 2 VAs, I have a video editor, I have designer, developer, content writers, SEO person. So there's all of these pieces that I'm also kind of managing, and which is why I hired that fractional CMO to help me manage my team better, right? Because
Yeah.
I can do all my marketing, all my sales, and all the conference things. So that was also a really big relief for me, just being able to be like, hey, we need this project done. Can you work with the team to get it finished?
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I guess in your head, who are some of the I guess business owners or content creators you follow and watch either for motivation or for insight to how to run your business better? Because I think a lot of my generation, as we start becoming business owners, we almost create these digital mentorships, and it's always fascinating for me to hear who everyone else watches.
I've had a tough time like finding mentors or people that I like because of the space that I'm in. It's like a brokering space. It's kind of weird. But I have a couple mentors of my own that are just in the agency space just because I like the way they run their agencies, the way that they like work with their team. They're just authentic humans. So I have a couple mentors there. Damon Burton is one of them. And I really just like just how he runs his business and just who he is for people. But in terms of just like following social accounts, it's just like the big people that you're kind of following to see kind of what they're doing, like the Alex Hormozzi's or the Cody Sanchez's, Dan Martell's, like that kind of stuff. But it's more around their content and stuff like that that I'm looking at. And then I read a lot of books. So one of the goals that I have for the next little bit is just like reading a ton of different types of business books. So I'm going deep into stuff. The one book that I've really liked, and I wish I could remember the author, but it's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Probably one of the best books I've read around business, just because it's so authentic and raw, and it talks about all the things that most people don't talk about when it comes to business and growing a business. And there's so many thoughts and ideas and things that I've like thought in my head, but he just like worded it. And I was like, that's exactly what I was thinking. It just really, really connects with me.
Yeah, what do you think's the biggest mindset shift that book has given you? Maybe from where you used to think to where you're starting to think.
Yeah. So a couple things were like he literally said in the book, like this guy started a startup and he was going through the whole like .com boom and all the different types of things that were happening at that time. And so he was constantly being barraged and attacked from all these different ways where he had to like basically sell off the biggest part of his business, convert it to something else, and then like get the team behind him and be like a leader to do all that stuff. And he had like 3 or 4 times where he was like literally a week from being like, all right, like the businesses can be gone if this like pivot doesn't make sense. It just showed you just like how fragile these businesses are that get like startup money and all that different kind of stuff and how important leadership was. And in that book, he talked about how for like 3 or 4 weeks, he was literally just, and I could kind of imagine like so many things were hitting him and his nervous system was just so ramped up that he's like, I went through meetings, not even knowing what those meetings were about. And I got through them. And he's like, for like 3 weeks, he's like, I slept like 4 or 5 hours. Like just the amount of like punishment he took on to get to where he was, where he sold his business for over $1 billion And the biggest thing he said when I asked CEOs what the hardest part about business was, or what got them through business, was they didn't give up. And mindset was literally the hardest thing for them to control, not even control, learn how to manage within business. And that just kind of just shows you like it really is just a mindset game and how you think about things moving forward that gets you to that level that you're looking to get to.
No, that's super interesting. Yeah, and you don't remember the author?
I could find them for you and send it over. But the hard thing about hard things, you'll find that author pretty fast.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely have to give that a read. Before we sign out here, I want to ask you two questions. So if someone watching this has a marketing company, video company, ads agency, whatever it is, why would they benefit from knowing you?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a marketing super connector. So at the end of the day, if I know about your business and I know you do something really, really well, when I get businesses that come in, I would love to match with amazing different types of marketing partners and amazing partners. The thing for me is key is like I want people to be in like the top 10% of what they do for the market that they do it for. So I'm not just looking for like average agencies that are figuring it out. I want people that are like really passionate. So, and when I have those people like in my circle, like I will refer work if it makes sense. So that would be the biggest thing. And the other thing is I'm connected into like the M&A world now, and that's going to be start being another part of the strategy. And so I'm always trying to think of like, how do I bring more value to my network as I'm having all these different types of conversations?
Okay, and then for the business owner who's been burnt 5, 6, 7 times and says all marketing agencies are evil, what do you have to say to them?
The biggest thing is just have a chat with me. I'll probably teach you and give you some insights into why it's so hard to find the right marketing partners. And especially if you're like thinking about certain type of channels that you want to turn on, like I can actually give you what it looks like around the bend, like how much effort it takes, how much money it takes, what you need to be thinking about. A lot of what I do is just like expectation set on the front end. And most people don't realize that that's the biggest thing that makes matches work. When the expectations are set on the front end, then the rest of it works so much more smoothly. And then I can actually refer you to people that are much higher than average. Like average agencies don't get through my vetting system, right? Like that just doesn't happen. You will get to work with higher quality partners, especially if you're only meeting with 3 to 5 marketing agencies before you hire one. Why not meet ones that have gone through my filter, which means that you're going to likely be talking to agencies that are a much higher level than what you'll find yourself.
Okay. And then for those people, how can they reach out to you? What is it like for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best way would be 2 ways. One is going to my website, so www.cjammarketing.com. And it's literally just like CJAM and then marketing.com, or finding me on LinkedIn underneath Behdad Jamshidi, which will likely be somewhere within this podcast episode. So hopefully you can spell it out.
Definitely. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for coming on. I know we've been rescheduling a little bit, but I was super excited for this. And I think this was helpful for me, but I think this is also going to be helpful for a lot of the people I work with because you really are doing something that, like you said, it is a very wide ocean. And I think it's very cool to see you take it on. So I'm hoping with every kind of new mergers and acquisitions world coming in, you'll be able to find the talent you've helped everyone else find.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for all the great questions.
Yep.